Bishop Matthew Hassan Kukah is a fierce, outspoken, and highly respected religious leader in Nigeria. When you had the Catholic Bishops' Conference in Akure, you did say President Muhammadu Buhari should stop blaming and past administrations and crying over what has happened in the past. Some actually said that the remarks you made at that conference, you were supporting corruption. What do you say?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. I'm happy that 2 years down the line or thereabout, almost everything I said has proved to have been a correct assessment. I'm not new on the Nigerian scene, and I think I've spent quite a little bit of time not only thinking but also talking about this country. And I think it's simply basic. I mean, this is the way nations progress. When Obama contested for the presidency of the United States of America, he spoke about the broken politics of Washington. But once he became president, fixing America became the narrative. Obama didn't have to waste his time talking about what he inherited, whether the war in Afghanistan or whether the war in Iraq. But the point I was simply making was that it was time, if we wanted Jonathan to continue to be president and people were happy with the accusations you were making, Jonathan would still be president. But you were voted in and Jonathan was voted out. So your being here is actually the reason why we voted. And my argument was very simple: get on with the job. And as I said, all the time we've wasted, whether talking about corruption and so on, the evidence is very clear. We haven't gained much mileage.
Yeah, you are also a staunch critic of President Muhammadu Buhari's war against corruption, as you have suggested. Can you explain this in terms of attacking his personality, or?
Look, I've never, ever attacked any person. And I think that, I've been writing and speaking in Nigeria for almost 40 years now. And I'm extraordinarily grateful to Nigerians because they've been fair to me. But also many people will tell me, and they will tell you very frankly, I've never made personalities an issue. And President Buhari and I go back quite a good number of years. And I always laugh, when I hear all these latter day converts to the Buhari project. People who are here because food is ready talk about, you are attacking I've got no business attacking Buhari, but he's got a government to run. And the good thing I'm happy about is that my criticisms of those who govern Nigeria have been consistent. And they also have, in private, also admitted, that they take my criticism pretty seriously because they know they are not personal. I mean, if you take somebody like President Obasanjo, with whom we have a lot of debate and argument, but he's a man I have a lot of respect for. But even he himself will tell you that he takes my observations pretty seriously, and that we argue and debate until we come to a point in which we're all in agreement. And I don't think that any serious Nigerian should talk about Buhari being president today and say you're attacking the president or you're attacking the APC or whatever. It's the line of least resistance, but I think it's more an expression of cowardice and ignorance than anything else.
Still on the corruption topic. Some of the supporters of the president are saying that, have alleged that Bishop Kukah is a beneficiary of corruption. And they say this because of the Kukah Center. Was the Kukah Center funded by President Goodluck Jonathan?
Thank you very much. I'm really happy, and for me it's very interesting. Like I said to people, I have a lot of my friends or critics who think that I am a billionaire in monetary terms, and they think, if you are with all these presidents and all these big people, it should translate into. And I laugh because, people think that everybody has a price. I think I'm very grateful to God, that I've set a certain threshold of integrity for myself and that God has guided me in that regard. The strategy document for this center was launched by President Jonathan. And like I tell people, I knew Jonathan before 90% of those jobbers and even his political associates. Because I first met President Jonathan when he was deputy governor. And I knew him as deputy governor and vice president and acting president and president. But where I'm eternally grateful to God that Jonathan and I never discussed money. And the good thing again, the only issue I raised with Jonathan was when he was on his Al-Majri school project. And I said, okay, you're building all these schools for Muslim kids. What about the Christian community in Sokoto, for example? And the fact of the matter is that indeed, when Jonathan launched the strategy document, my interest was in making I would have invited any Nigerian president. But it was also very interesting that on that day, I made sure money was not discussed. And nobody gave me a penny. And with Jonathan never offered us any money, nor did we ask him to offer us any money. I think I'm also convinced that perhaps if I had asked him, but I was interested, the first person who raised this issue with me was the late Yaradua, who, when I was negotiating with Shell, to end the conflict in Ogoniland, one day he said to me, he said, Bishop Kukah, you've worked so hard for this country, and I've known you for even in my days as a university student. What has Nigeria done for you? And here he was sitting as a president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, after I had negotiated for the government to pay UNEP $10 million. And I remember, because it was something I was quite passionate about, and he says to me, he said, we've paid UNEP $10 million. What is in it for you? And I said, look, this is my country. If I wanted to make money, I would not be a priest. It doesn't mean I don't want money, but the only money I want is the money that can make life better for ordinary Nigerians. So and like I said to people, anybody who talks about corruption, I'm here and I'm going nowhere. And I've said, please step forward and let's have a conversation. Okay? Because you see, Nigerians don't like to follow through an argument. And they think that the easiest thing, and many of these people who are saying the things they are saying, Buhari was not brought to power by angels. We know the nature of the vehicle that will bring anybody to the presidency of Nigeria. We know the nature of the vehicle that every governor, every senator will ride to get to power in Nigeria. So that because every time you talk, people say you are a beneficiary of Jonathan's corruption. Well, a lot of people who are beneficiaries of Jonathan's corruption, either as ministers or when he was president. And I guess it is a measure of the man's greatness that he has not stepped forward to tell people the things that they need to know. But like I've said, my doors are open. Anybody who thinks that we want to discuss corruption in practice or in theory, any time of day, 24 hours, 7 days a week, I'm more than happy to have that conversation.
You seem to know President Buhari quite well, and even on a personal level for quite a while. The perception out there is that do you agree he's largely incompetent, unintelligent?
Well, I don't know about that. I have no scorecard for that, but I've known Buhari for a while. I don't want to claim that I'm close to him. Right. But he's a man I have tremendous respect for. And that's why when people say, oh, you don't like the president, let me give you a simple example. When people were making this noise, the internet, like somebody said, I put the internet on fire because I raised the issue of. And what I said about Buhari's corruption fight was, I said, listen, we're fighting corruption. What you call the fight against corruption, you're fighting a symptom. It's not the disease. I didn't think that the government had developed enough intellectual architecture. One, for understanding why is it that corruption has gotten us to where we are, and what really is corruption. Subsequently, when other nepotistic tendencies began to manifest themselves and cronyism came to the fore, come on, give me a break. What is the name? Because I guess my worry was that President Buhari thought, and probably still thinks, that corruption is people stealing money, and the people stealing money are largely bureaucrats or government officials, which is what happened in 1983 or 1984. That the Buhari simply went around and arrested all the people who were, holding government offices, governors, president, and so on and so forth. And yet, like I said to Nigerians, if you remember the trials, the only thing that you feel very sad about Nigeria is our collective amnesia. But there are people who are the key kingpins in APC today who were sentenced to various terms of imprisonment by Buhari in 1984, some up to 100 years. But since this is Nigeria, many of those guys have finished serving their 100-year jail term. They have come back, they've joined APC, they are active members of the party. The names are there. You don't have to go to any records. The evidence is there. So for me, it's not about, I'm not the one to measure Buhari's competence. But again, the great thing about democracy is the need for us to be patient. It will take us 4 years to decide whether Buhari is the man for the job or not. Or we have a National Assembly. If they are serious and up to their job, they can stop an incompetent president midway. So for me, these are the issues.
That takes me to my next question. Has Buhari failed? Does he deserve a second term?
Look, I mean, I'm not, like I said, look, I am a citizen of Nigeria. I've got only one vote. I am not about to say whether Buhari has failed or not failed, in part because Buhari is going to be president for 4 years. We've not even come close to, we're nowhere, I mean, we've just gone past the first half. And like a game of soccer or any game, until the final whistle is blown, you can't say who has won. It is quite conceivable that Buhari might probably do something quite spectacular. And that, for example, he's going to the southeast, which I think is a little bit unfortunate because it came so many years too late. But notwithstanding that, I think that with a certain kind of smartness, so to say, and if the president has the ability to look back, and take a balcony view and say, what could we have done differently? And if he can take his attention away from some of the hypocrites who surround him and who actually want to borrow his voice, but who pretend and think that anybody who is critical of government necessarily has a motive. Those, more than any other set of people, will be far more dangerous for his ambition. But I think Buhari is free to, step forward and say that he wants to run for the 2019 elections. One, if he discusses with his family. Two, the party feels him. Three, if he feels he's strong enough. It's left for Nigerians to decide.
Buhari has done much to correct the perception done around the misconception around religious extremism. I don't know if you recall the case of Mrs. Bridgette in Kubwa, who was attacked and killed some time back. And the president's statement passed off as though he did not address the issue properly. Please, can you talk about this?
I don't know whether I want to talk about that in isolation. About a month or so ago, I delivered a sermon here in Abuja. And what I did was just to extract a paragraph of what the president himself had said when he met with the bishops' conference as a presidential candidate. And I loved the speech, and I thought the speech was going to be a deal breaker, because in that speech, among a lot of other things, Buhari was struggling to convince Nigerians that he wasn't a religious bigot, of which he has been portrayed to be. He told the bishops, government has no business with politics. So the government has no business with religion. And then he then took on the very difficult issue that should anybody be involved, for example, in killing others, in burning churches, in burning mosques, or in burning property in the name of religion, that person or those people will be arrested, they will be tried, they will be convicted, and those whose properties have been destroyed will be entitled to compensation. The question I raised was, over 2 years, with all the killings across the Middle Belt, across Nigeria, by Fulani headsmen, by all kinds of people, the destruction of churches, and everything that has taken place, we have not had an official statement from the government, not to talk of, let's have a conversation about compensation. The governor, we just came from Borno, the governor of Borno has actually embarked on a massive program of reconstructing, for the first time, churches and mosques that have been destroyed. That's the way to go. Again, when I raised this issue, I saw something that somebody published as evidence that, I don't like President Buhari, or that I don't like this government. But as I said, governance is not a beauty contest. So it's not a question of whether I like or don't like. That is not the issue. So if you want me to speak about the issues, I had high hopes that this government would be able to very frontally take on the issue of religion. But as we can see, there are complaints, for example, about the way political appointments have occurred, the lopsidedness of the political appointments, whether it's in religion or region that you take. These are issues of concern. And it's not a question that there are very few people out there that you can say that their performance has been so eloquent that it validates the claim that they got the job because they qualified. So the issue of religion is one of the things that I was actually very convinced Buhari would be able to deal with. And way back in 2003, I think, when Buhari himself was being savaged publicly by a lot of people who have now come around to the table, and Buhari was presented nationally as a religious bigot that nobody should vote for. I, Matthew Hassan Kukah, I'm very proud of that. I single-handedly rejected all the journalists came to me. Khan made statements. Religious leaders made statements. But I wrote an almost 5,000-word essay defending President Buhari's legacy and my conviction that he wasn't the way people presented him to be. 10 years later, will I say the same thing? I don't know, but the evidence is out there. And I think that, frankly, this government has it has pushed us a little bit back from where we thought we had climbed out in terms of dealing with the issues of religion and religious differences.
On the platform recently, you said Nigerians have every right to be angry. What are you angry about today?
Well, we have a reason to be angry. What? The slow pace of movement, the persistence of allegations of corruption, the sheer lack of clarity as to where we are going, the lack of urgency in addressing the issues of where our country is and the kind of promises that this government made. Everywhere, and you know, you really don't need to talk to Bishop Kukah. You need to go back to the members of the APC and talk to them, or read the kind of things that the members of the party themselves are saying. These are not, so it's not anybody who talks about opposition to this government should actually look within the government itself, the kind of things that people are saying. So it's not, for me, it's not a question of how individuals feel. It is that very clearly every Nigerian is angry. But again, like Tolstoy said, unhappy people are unhappy differently. The people who have not been paid their pension, the millions of young Nigerians who have no jobs, the millions of young Nigerians who cannot get into university, millions of people who are unemployed, the seeming climate of violence that has literally consumed this country, the very brazen return to Eden, let me put it that way, by which individuals and groups now show that their ethnic locations are far more important, their religions are far more important to them than the project called Nigeria. Clearly, we've never been on this kind of road before. And that is why I'm personally, for me, it's a call of urgency. One, because I think I understand a little bit what this country is. And I think that when you look at what happened in 2015, how the votes went and how peaceful the elections were, and the kind of high hopes that Nigerians had, we were not expecting miracles. And frankly, my argument was, and I'm speaking here as an intellectual, not because I could be 100% wrong, but I was convinced that national stability was far more important as a project than the talk about fighting corruption. Not because fighting corruption was not important, but because, like I said, you are like a man dancing on a wet grave. We needed to stabilize our nation. And because that didn't happen, Niger Delta, IPOB, OPC, now, all these are not evidence of people's anger. They're just evidence of a government that hasn't thought very clearly about the science of national stability. And some of the things that make for national stability are largely intangible. It's not about jobs or so. Government cannot secure everybody by just declaration. No. But if we have a democracy now in which, as the Chief of Army Staff himself said, and I think the numbers may have changed, that out of 36 states, soldiers are present in 32 states. We're not in a democracy. Because the presence of the military is an antithesis of democracy. So also the feeling of the lack of free flow of information and lack of free flow of, because we voted to be free, and there's nothing, you cannot substitute freedom for anything else. So for me, it is that Nigerians are visibly angry, and the anger is out there. Perhaps the only thing where the government should be grateful to God for is that we've never developed a culture of colonizing the streets. So people are angry. They either go and beat up their wives or beat up their children or get involved in communal violence. But we have never figured out, and I think this is a responsibility that we, who are the unarmed members of the forces, so to say, those who have no political affiliation, should now begin to figure out how do we convince our people to begin to find platforms for expressing their sense of moral revulsion. Because you are angry with any government policy in Nigeria, there's no place to turn to. And angry policemen or angry security agencies have never been an obstacle to people with a resolve. Tiananmen Square is an example. If you go back and play the footage of the young man in Tiananmen Square who was faced with an armored tank. The armored tank is coming towards him. He goes this way, he went this way, he goes this way. If you go and Google it, you will see it. So we must get our people to a point in which they appreciate when the value of their life is depreciating. And this is what is happening to us now, because in most parts of northern Nigeria, for example, where children are stunting, and there are high percentages of children who are stunting. Now, if these are 1 million children or 2 million children, when those children turn to be 20, 30, and they become part of your workforce, their capacity to interpret data, or their capacity to grasp the urgency of development is severely constrained. So for me, these are some of the issues. And that's why I said Buhari himself is not happy. Nobody in APC can, except maybe a few ministers. But even the ministers themselves are unhappy because they didn't imagine that they would be going through the difficulties that they are going through. So if I ask you to point at one department of government that is so upbeat about what people have achieved, I don't think, I think you'll be hard put to find out any.
On the basis of merit and quality, let's look at the presidential aspirants that have so far signaled interest to run for 2019. We have Ayodele Fayose of Ekiti State, we have Donald Duke, the former governor of Cross River State, we have Sule Lamido, and Atiku Abubakar, the former vice president of Nigeria.
Well, my position is always very simple in these matters. I just say to people, it's too early in the day. We don't know who is going to be alive in 2019. But I'm not saying people should not aspire. I mean, this is a free country. Many of them have track records. And I think if anybody who has ever been a governor or a minister presents themselves, we should go back and check their records as a proof of their capacity and their competence. But I don't think that anybody should worry about who has capacity or doesn't have capacity. I think any of those people eloquently qualifies to be president of Nigeria. The choice is left for Nigerians. But again, like I said, it is left for us to return to the scene of the crime. When these people were governors for 8 years, we can go back and check, because their legacy is actually ought to be what will guide the kind of choices that we make.
On what condition would you not vote in 2019? Any candidate in 2019?
I will vote, unless I lose my voter's card. But I will vote.
That's the only condition you have?
Absolutely.
Now, final word to Nigerians on the current hardship that is going on across the country.
Well, I'm tired of telling Nigerians to be hopeful, but we must also remain hopeful. But, my concern really is that too many Nigerians are busy struggling for their own survival. The result is that the national project is in jeopardy. And so if the government does not work extremely hard to reclaim the legitimate loyalty of its citizens, it will be like a man whose 5 children grew up, decided to go to the streets, fend for themselves, or a father who abandoned his children and comes back to the house after every child has either found a job for themselves or they are, what they want to be. So my worry really is that government is doing so little, communicating even so little, and that because Nigerians have appropriated their own devices for survival, which is what you call corruption, that you really don't have the moral authority to fight corruption if, as it is, and this is the situation in Nigeria now, that people see it as the legitimate means of survival. So, and this is why you see that collectively we don't have what I call, again, the sense of moral revulsion against corruption, because if the hospitals are not working, and if the ministers and the president and every big person who is sick can fly out of the country for treatment, and people are left to their own devices, there's very little you can say to anybody subsequently. And this is why, you hear the elite talking about citizens are not patriotic and so on, but people cannot be patriotic because the relationship between citizens and government is a transaction. And like the economists will say, There have to be incentive compatibility. The incentives you offer me to be patriotic have to be compatible with my own, ambition, i.e., I should be able to have an idea where I go to if I'm sick. 2, I'm a young graduate. I need to be able to get a job. Even if you don't offer me a job, create a condition. 3, I'm a pensioner. I've retired. I've worked for this country for 40, 50 years. Can I get my pension? So for me, it's a collection of all these things that make for patriotism. People don't just become patriotic because they have government jobs, which is actually the case now. That a lot of the most patriotic citizens in Nigeria are often the ministers and the senators. And they think the rest of us are not patriotic because we don't love this country.
Yeah, a lady called Bridgette was beheaded for blasphemy in Kano. Yet the president gave a statement that felt as though he was justifying the killings, where he mentioned that people should be tolerant of other people's religion. What do you say about? Can you address this issue?
Well, first of all, I don't think the president would have said the kind of things he's alleged to have said, unless it probably was misrepresented. Yes, there is a case to be made for cultural sensibilities, but I think what is most important is, again, the lack of very serious moral revulsion. Because against this backdrop, her head was chopped off. That's not the first time. A gentleman called Akaluka suffered the same thing in Kano. You have a huge culture of people taking the law into their hands, especially the miscreants. I mean, the burning of churches in Nigeria, the killing of Christians in their places of worship, and so on and so forth. These things have been prevalent. You are not going to excuse them by simply saying it's not about respect of culture. It's not about cultural sensibilities. It's about whether a country decides that it's going to deal with the issues of, first of all, human rights and the equality of our rights, and that nobody has the right or the power to take a life. Whether if somebody expresses a lack of cultural sensibility, there is a process. You take the person to court. Elsewhere, in more civilized environments, there are rules guiding verbal assault, there's physical assault. It's only in Nigeria that a lot of these people have been allowed to get away with so much. But clearly, my own personal conviction is that in most parts of northern Nigeria, for example, the tragedy which is now catching up with us, and a lot of that is probably part of the script of Boko Haram, is that so many people got away with so much, and that we still have a state that is reluctant to become democratic, that is reluctant to bring in various components of this country to live under one rule and under one constitution. I think, for me, those are the issues. And that if somebody was so brutally killed, you need to make a lesson of the person who has done that. And you don't make a lesson of it by hanging them, but by putting them through a process, because that is the only way that you can stop it from happening.
Thank you, Bishop Kukah, for your time.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.